Yeah, and I mean, Norfolk Southern is starting a $1 million,
That's it?
pot of charity or
That's
something
it?
for these That's what I'm saying.
$1 million does not go far
Drag
these
them
days.
to court.
What?
You know,
That is ridiculous.
I don't care how much money it is. Like, they should have to pay restitution to these residents. And I really feel like if we just opened up the market, got the EPA out of the way, and let courts really do their thing here, then residents would be able to sue Norfolk Southern for all of it, you know, like every cent to make things right. And no company would ever risk doing something like this in the future. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Indoctrination. I'm Maggie.
And I'm Olivia.
And this week we are digging into an insanely big news story that has been all over the news lately. My Twitter feed recently, I don't know about you, Olivia, but we have been buzzing with just weird occurrences happening. I do think aliens might be invading Earth right now.
The world might be ending, but have no fear. Olivia and Maggie are here to break down the story for
exactly
you guys.
What's going on. Yeah. But one strange occurrence has really dominated the news, and that is the train derailment in East Palestine. And, you know, I thought this was such a good opportunity to dig into what actually happened. There's a lot of strange stuff around this.
Yeah, it's looking a little fishy from a couple of different points. I think we should go over it because I even just like reading the news cycle stuff was not really making sense to me. Like, okay, they decided to burn it in a giant explosion and thought that nothing would contaminate it. And then the EPA, FEMA, they didn't move quick enough. Pete Buttigieg, the secretary of the Department of Transportation, he didn't say anything for like 2 weeks. Like,
girl, everybody's
involved,
stuff is weird, but way too late.
Yeah, it's really, really weird. But let's get into it.
Yeah, so let's go back in time to what actually happened, break down the facts for everyone. So on the night of February 3rd, just before 9 p.m., a Norfolk Southern train is riding through this small Ohio town called East Palestine. It's right next to the Pennsylvania border. And this is a very small town. There's about 5,000 people in it. So I think that makes it smaller than my hometown, which is incredibly small.
Right.
And as this train is making its way through East Palestine, 38 cars of the 150 cars attached to this train suddenly derail. And what that means is they come off the rails. The train was carrying a lot of random different things. I went into the logs of the train and found they were carrying like several cars of malt liquors, frozen vegetables, building materials like cement. And also, they were carrying extremely hazardous materials. Now, luck would have it that 5 of these 38 cars that came off the rails in East Palestine were carrying really hazardous chemicals. The main one that people are focusing on is vinyl chloride, but butyl acrylate, ethyl hexyl acrylate, and some other ones. I don't need to pronounce these.
So what are these chemicals for? Are these like cleaning products, or like what were they even being transported for?
So vinyl chloride is a substance used to make PVC. So it would make sense that this was getting carried in kind of a, in the building materials section.
Mm-hmm.
But this chemical can be very, very dangerous. It causes dizziness, sleepiness, headaches, and is also linked to an increased risk of cancer in the liver, brain, lungs, and blood.
So let's dump it all right into this small town.
Yeah.
Let's dump it right there. I love that idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And so all of this gets dumped out, and they have this bright idea to intentionally burn off the vinyl chloride in a controlled explosion because they're worried about this massive explosion happening. So officials are like, okay, we need to do a controlled burning of
Literally,
this.
whatever that means, because what about that was controlled? Like,
Girl,
look at the factors.
Smoke cloud has traversed the United States. It's gone all over several
what
states.
About that was controlled?
I know.
And it's crazy that the governor, the governor of Ohio, DeWine, he gave the call. He allowed them to do this. And the officials in Pennsylvania as well, because it's so near the border. So they approved this call for Norfolk Southern to do this. So it's not even just this evil corporation. I know that a lot of people just want to blame the corporation, but a lot of it is the government too.
Right. And I think, these officials probably had legitimate reasons to do so, because not burning it off in this controlled way.
I'm sure Norfolk Southern was like,
could have been much worse.
This is going to be much worse if we don't do this. We need your approval. And, something happened where they got the stamp of approval. I still am struggling to understand what about that was controlled. Where did it go wrong? I don't even know if I believe the investigation on that has still not even concluded. So we don't know exactly what went wrong with the explosion. But what went wrong with the derailment has kind of been I guess has kind of been released by a preliminary investigation, and it's looking kind of bad. It's looking pretty bad for the railroad company, actually.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm excited to get into it. Yeah, I know you bring the receipts. So,
I always do.
But back to burning this vinyl chloride. Did you know that burning it can break it down into a compound, including hydrogen chloride and phosgene, a chemical weapon used during World War I as a choking agent?
I did not know that, but that sounds horrible. And it definitely sounds like, yes, we should definitely dump this onto this small town of 5,000 people who are like all
just
small
these families that are trying to get
just
through their
working
lives.
Class families, who needs them?
Yeah, absolutely. And these residents are asked to evacuate their homes for 5 days. That's it. And they need to evacuate their homes. Like these are really dangerous chemicals that have been released, and it is causing serious health problems almost immediately for residents. And it killed off like 43,000 animals.
People are not talking about that enough.
Yeah.
How is the water safe to drink if all the animals in the water have died?
Right. And I think people just don't care about the fish or something, but 43,000 animals pass away in the 3 weeks.
This is a disaster. It will have lasting consequences on the environment. I know the left takes a monopoly on the environment topic from the conservatives, and I really don't like that because it's so partisan. And I really want them to just acknowledge, 43,000 fish and other aquatic animals just died. What is that going to do for the environment? What is that going to do for the people that live here? This isn't just going to be like, okay, go away for 5 days and come back and everything's fine. It is clearly not fine.
This is a disaster for East Palestine. So obviously the EPA comes in. You have local officials there too. And the EPA decides that Norfolk Southern is going to foot the bill for all the things that they're doing, including cleaning up the water resources, reimbursing for all cleaning services to be offered to residents, attending public meetings at the EPA's request, and all other costs associated with this cleanup. There's conflicting pieces of evidence about this, but it seems like maybe cleaning up the soil was missing from the list of what they were going to do. Yes. And I know that you dug in a little bit and found some weird stuff around this. I think they asked Norfolk Southern, yo, what's going on with the soil? Are we cleaning it up? And they were like, I think we're moving it around a little bit or something. But when it rains and the soil is still contaminated, that's just going to run back off into the water.
Right.
So what exactly happened here?
So I do believe you're right that originally the EPA did not give them a directive on the soil. I think they were still trying to figure out what exactly to do about the soil because of what you just said. It's really hard to contain it because the rainwater will just wash it back into the waterway. So they're handling the decontamination of the water and the air and all this. Meanwhile, Norfolk Southern takes it upon themselves without the EPA's approval or without anybody else's approval to start trucking truckloads of the contaminated soil to facilities in Michigan and Texas. They did not get approval from
I would not
Michigan
trust
or
those
Texas.
trucks.
No, absolutely not. I would be like, so Norfolk Southern,
Gonna be
the
breaking
same
down
company
everywhere.
that dumped all this stuff in East Palestine is going to dump it in Michigan, Texas? No. So anyways, it literally took a congresswoman, I forget which one, it was a Democratic congresswoman who represents the district in Michigan where they were going to dump it in this facility, I guess a waste management facility, hopefully. She was like, yo, we did not approve of this. This should have been run by us first. And then the regional EPA director said, turn around, take it back. So some of the stuff was already dumped in Michigan, but the trucks that were on the road, they literally turned around and took the contaminants back to East Palestine. So it was such a mismanagement in all regards, honestly. Why are you taking it back to the site? Why did you move it to a site that wasn't approved of first? It's just a lot going on.
Yeah, so all of this cleanup is happening, I'm assuming, in the 5 days after all of these residents were evacuated. 5 days after that, they're told, okay, everything's safe, you can come back. Like, the EPA
Would y'all believe them? Like, genuinely, Maggie, if you lived there, would you believe that?
I would not. Specifically because these residents start pouring back into the town and they are having physical symptoms. Like, as soon as they get back into town, the air smells really weird. I think it's the chlorine that they were using to clean stuff. People reported that they were feeling dizzy, feeling nauseous. Their throats were closing up. It was hard to breathe. Their children were getting rashes all over. And the EPA is like, so we tested the soil and the water and the air, and it doesn't look like, these toxins are really above the limit that we consider toxic.
I like your EPA voice.
So, and the residents are just like, no,
there was a woman who came forward that her chickens died. Like, it's not even just fish.
Died.
Yeah, there was a woman who came forward and said her chickens died. And let me play devil's advocate for a moment. If this happened to my town, I would be blaming a stubbed toe on them. I would be getting whatever check I could from the government in Norfolk. I would be like, oh, that injury I had 5 years ago from wrestling, that just happened actually right now because of the vinyl chloride. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But yeah, there's been people who have reported like serious symptoms in their bodies, and that chickens and livestock and stuff are suffering as well.
Right. And the EPA's response to this, the amount of articles I read talking about the residents and what they're going through, every single time, the EPA, local officials, everyone is like, contact your medical provider, but we assure you that it's safe. It is like the highest level of gaslighting happening to these 5,000
Where have we heard
residents.
this before? Where have we heard this before? Do you remember? And Flint, Michigan still does not have 100% clean water. So that is something that we also have to look back at. But do you remember when Barack Obama visited Flint, Michigan, or Detroit or whatever, and held up a glass of water, drank it in front of the crowd? I think he actually pretended to drink it. It said, look, it's safe. You can drink the water. And then it wasn't actually safe and they found lead in the water. This is what that's reminding me of. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the EPA. I don't trust the corporation that did this to this small town either. And it's sad to see because these people there are not necessarily politically powerful. I don't think that, I do think that there's kind of this narrative that maybe they deserved it because they're Trump supporters. And I don't know if you watched The View recently, and I try to stay away from The View, but sometimes the clips just make their way on on my timeline, but they're blaming them. And it's honestly horrible to me.
They blamed them?
They said that they voted for Trump, and we'll get into this, but a lot of people have been blaming Trump for this whole thing, and he hasn't been president in 2 years.
Oh, girl.
So it's ridiculous.
Trust me.
Yep.
We will get into it.
Yeah.
We will get into it. Yeah. I just feel like, this is a middle America town. It's in the Rust Belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a part of the country that has largely been forgotten about by politicians up until 2016, when the Rust Belt became a major focus because it's how Trump won so much support, because he focused on them.
Say what
Not
you want
saying
about
that he
Trump,
did it in the right way.
He focused on a forgotten demographic of people, which is working class, rural, white folks who felt a little bit disenfranchised by their local leaders. and national leaders as well. And now they're being blamed once again for a corporation dumping harmful chemicals onto their town, killing their fish, killing livestock, and the government not doing anything about it. It took Pete Buttigieg like 10 days to say anything, maybe even 2 whole weeks, and it took him 3 whole weeks to get down there. Maybe even more than that. But yeah, it took him a long time. Yeah, because it happened on February 3rd. It's February 28th when we're filming this. And he just went this week. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people have been criticizing Biden for going overseas to Ukraine instead of staying home to take care of this. And Trump showed up, of course, at McDonald's or something and
He's
was handing out Big Macs.
He's a man of the people.
Yeah, I just feel like for me, this is not a situation where we should be like,
it's not a photo op situation. Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
like why are we doing like the presidential circuit after a natural disaster just happened? Like that, it kind of bothers me. Although I'm glad at least his presence there brought some attention. I mean, to the situation.
I think it just goes to show that because it took the Biden administration forever to get down there. They don't care about it because it's a small town full of Trump supporters. Trump went down there because he knows that they're full of his supporters and they would like to see him during a time like this. So I get it. I also get that it was totally used as a photo op. But for those people, I mean, I saw the pictures in the McDonald's. They looked like they were really happy to see him there. So just to put that out there.
I'm sure they were very happy. It feels
Imagine
good to
Trump
be
pulls
like
up to your McDonald's.
Yeah. Absolutely, especially while, again, the EPA and Norfolk Southern are like gaslighting you about your physical symptoms. They held a town hall, I think it was 2 weeks after the derailment, because residents were pissed. Okay, residents were pissed. And Norfolk Southern was supposed to be there, but ended up pulling out last minute.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, we're worried about our workers' safety
what about
and
the
people harming
safety?
them. You know what? That's a great point, Olivia. I had not thought of that. Yeah, what about the people's safety? Although I understand because, if this had happened back in Cajun country, we would have been ready to whoop some butt, okay?
Would you guys have, tarred and
Do not
feathered
mess
them?
with our chickens. There is a whole song in Cajun country called You Stole My Chicken. Okay, we do not mess around with our waterways.
It's
and
still
our animals.
cowardly, though. It's still cowardly. If you gotta reel some intern out there to get some tomatoes thrown at them, then do it. Okay, just show up.
Right.
That's all they ask, and I think it's really ridiculous. Because what if the people wanted to ask them some questions? I mean, they owe them some answers.
Absolutely,
and they
we'll
definitely
get into this.
Yeah,
but we used to have a court system where victims could address the people who had committed these crimes against them directly and get direct support from them and be made whole again, right? But that's not what we have anymore, and we've abdicated a lot of that responsibility to the EPA, who is, by the way, on the side of these companies that are cutting corners.
Absolutely. But they're their biggest lobby groups, or transportation companies and companies that damage the environment. They lobby the EPA and they lobby the Department of Transportation all the time. And so now the EPA and the Department of Transportation have, again, this is what we can go into them blaming Trump now because it's really ridiculous. So in his first statement, acknowledging that this happened 10 days after that the derailment happened in East Palestine, Pete Buttigieg said, "We're constrained by law on some areas of rail regulation, like the braking rule withdrawn by the Trump administration in 2018 because of a law passed by Congress in 2015. So that's a quote.
Wait, come again? What were those dates?
The Trump administration law in 2018 because of a law passed by Congress in 2015. And yes, it's confusing, and he purposely left it confusing because if you dug the least bit into it, you would realize that it's not Trump's fault. So the narrative perpetuated by Buttigieg is that Trump is responsible because his administration in 2017 repealed an Obama-era rule that would have required electronically controlled pneumatic brakes. They're called ECPs. On high hazard trains that carry flammable hazardous materials. So a government accountability office GOA report found that the evidence to support the benefits of this was shaky, so they axed it. So that really the costs outweighed the benefits. This wasn't really a problem, and the actual technology in the device was kind of like, we don't know if this is going to work or not. And the GOA report was required by a 2015 Obama era law. So that's what Pete Buttigieg is talking about when he says, okay, this 2017, the Trump administration repealed this because of a 2015 rule. It was because of a Democratic controlled administration made this rule for the GOA, the Government Accountability Office, to do a report on changes like this, including the ECP policy that was suggested, which caused the Trump administration, the Department of Transportation under the Trump administration to repeal the ECP thing. They didn't think it was necessary. Later, the Associated Press discovered that the DOT estimate had miscalculated the potential benefits. So it was even worse. So it was like really not even worth it at that point. Even with the correction, the department still found that the cost outweighed the benefits of installing these ECPs. And then, furthermore, the Biden administration, Biden has been in office since January 2021. The last 2 years, he could have reinstated the ECP rule if they wanted to, but they didn't. And so the Washington Post, who are typically very biased, they're owned by Jeff Bezos, but I do read them because sometimes they have good analysis. Quote from the Washington Post, "From our analysis, none of the regulatory changes made during the Trump administration at this point can be cited as contributing to the accident." And I really like citing kind of lefty news outlets because they want to blame Trump. You know, they want to blame the Republicans. They want to blame everybody who wouldn't be Pete Buttigieg or wouldn't be Biden. But they literally found that this ECP rule that Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Department of Transportation, could have reinstated. He could have reinstated when Biden took office and when he was appointed to that position, but he did not. So he blamed it on Trump. It's sickening. And back to The View, Joy Behar of The View said that's who you voted for in that district, Donald Trump, who reduces the safety. That's a direct quote too. I mean, the narrative that Pete has kind of pushed out there is being recycled in mainstream media and blaming this town of Trump supporters, blaming former President Trump. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just think I think because we're getting close to an election year again, both parties will take any opportunity they can get to politicize this issue and turn it into a partisan issue, when my problem with what happened is that we have kind of pushed, like, there are two different types of regulations, one of which comes from the government, which can change at the drop of the hat, and they're pretty arbitrary, right? These are administrators and politicians who don't really know much about these industries coming up with rules. When in the past, like a very long time ago, we used to use the courts, right? So let's say this had happened, all of these residents of East Palestine could have gone and sued Norfolk Southern, right? And then the courts would have acted as an intermediary to make, you know, Norfolk Southern pay and make these residents whole again for the property crimes.
There is a lawsuit going on though, right?
Yeah. But the property crimes, like, that's what this is. This is a private property issue, you know, because these people essentially were forced out of their homes for 5 days. There are several families who cite just the sheer amount of money they've had to spend in keeping their families in Airbnbs. This has been a huge economic cost to the residents of East Palestine, and it should be Norfolk Southern alone who is responsible for coming in and paying restitution to these victims, essentially. But what ended up happening, the courts used to function that way. What ended up happening is we, you know, decided they wouldn't. So this happened during the progressive era.
Oh, lovely.
And pollution and things like this started happening more often as more and more companies were able to cut corners. And it got to a point where the EPA came into existence. And now there's a bunch of arbitrary regulations that can get changed at the drop of the hat. Like, as you saw, instead of private companies being incentivized through fear of lawsuits or, you know, something disastrous like this happening, to institute safety measures. Like, largely they're just relying on EPA regulations
and these
to
huge
figure out what to
regulatory
do.
boards, what do they even do? I mean, they're always investigating. They're always trying to find out, come to the bottom of this. But it's really, really strange because the National Transportation Safety Board, so the NTSB, they're basically the federal agency in charge of investigating transportation accidents. And so in their preliminary report that they just released, they said that the operators of the train received several warnings to ensure that this didn't happen, like audible warnings that they ignored. According to the agency,
What?
yep. According to the
Are you
agency,
serious?
a
Why did they ignore
critical
this?
dude, we don't know yet, but it
What?
literally gets so suspicious. So in the preliminary report that the NTSB released, they said a critical audible alarm message instructed the crew to slow down and stop the train to inspect a hot axle on 3 separate occasions when a hot bearing detector system observed high levels of heat. So this hot bearing detector system literally takes the temperature of the bearings that are on the railway and alerts, like literally makes an audible alert system warning saying, yo, check these temperatures, they're too hot, pull over. After the final warning, so the third warning, the train's engineer, who was already braking due to a train ahead, increased the dynamic brake application to further slow and stop the train. But that
It was too late.
it was too late. So at the first system sensor, the suspect bearing, the thing that the one that caused the derailment on the 23rd car, had a temperature of 38 degrees above what it was supposed to be. At the second system, when it warned again, it was 103 degrees above what it was supposed to be. At the third and final system, right before it derailed, it was 253 degrees Fahrenheit above ambient, what it was supposed to be. That is inexcusable. That is
gross
insane.
negligence.
250. Like, do you guys know even how 250 degrees is? Like, that is hot. It was that much higher above what it was supposed to be. So this is hundreds of degrees. And so this is a crazy quote. Okay, listen to this. The NTSB chair, Jennifer Hamady, she said it in a press conference. We call these things accidents, but there is no such thing as an accident. Every single event that we investigate is 100% preventable. So she was like, this is not an accident. This was preventable. There was 3 warning signs. It was 253 degrees above what it was supposed to be. There were so many things wrong with this. It's so suspicious to me.
Do you think the people on the train just didn't know what was going on, or?
You know, I'm not a railroad conductor,
prevented.
clearly, so I don't know how this, like, I don't know exactly the mechanics behind this, but if there was 3 audible warnings and it was overheating and the conductor is only braking because of a train ahead and not because of the warnings, and then decides to pull the brake to further slow it down and stop and then get out and check, and it's already an issue, it just seems weird to me. That's all I will say. It seems weird to me.
Yeah. I'm gonna need these residents to drag Norfolk Southern to court.
They should. Honestly, maybe they shouldn't show up to the town hall because they might have got dragged.
Yeah, I did want to read a few, like just 2 stories of people in the town and what they've been going through.
Oh, go ahead.
So there's a lady named Desiree Walker. She lives just 900 feet from the site of the wreck. And by the way, a lot of these residents lived really close. Like, this is a small town, okay?
Right.
And residents outside of the town are being affected as well. But so she lived very, very close. She and her family are having symptoms, she says, but doctors don't know what to test for. She says at nighttime, especially, is when we smell it the most. That is creepy. Our throats are sore. We're coughing a lot. My son, his eyes matted shut.
What?
That is so disturbing.
Do you think maybe they're smelling like like whatever they're using to decontaminate it? Are they like doing that more at night or something?
I guess. I think I also read somewhere, I don't know this for sure, but a lot of these chemicals have a really low odor threshold, which, by the way, odor in and of itself is a nuisance. Like, you shouldn't have to stay there while this company is trying to get rid of these disgusting toxic chemicals.
Because one thing I'm saying all across the board is everybody says it smells bad. So yeah.
Oh, 5 days after, they're like, yeah, you can come home. And then Nathan Velez said that he and his wife and 2 children have been staying at Airbnb rentals. He says, my wife is a nurse and is not taking any chances exposing us or our 2 young kids to whatever is now in our town. When he visited the town Monday, he smelled chlorine in the air, right?
Okay.
Burning his throat and eyes. He said the risk and anxiety of trying to live in our own home again is not worth it.
That is horrible.
Yeah.
Imagine being a kid in that situation.
Norfolk Southern could not be bothered to show up to the town hall, I think 2 weeks after the train derailment, to hear these stories. And again, the EPA is all up in this town's business saying, okay, well, we've determined that it's safe. I would not trust that. I would not trust the EPA as far as I can throw them.
No. And even other agencies. So FEMA denied them disaster relief funds. They said they did not qualify for disaster relief funds. So the money that the town could have gotten, say, for people to relocate or to evacuate the area, they did not get FEMA money for that. So thanks, Biden administration, for that. Thank you, EPA. Thank you, Norfolk Southern. And like you said, it's affecting not even just East Palestine people. Yeah. The water, so there's basically 2 main creeks that got contaminated. I remember the name of one of them was Sulphur Run, and the other one may have been like maybe Turkey Run or something like that. But it was another run creek, and they pour out into the Ohio River. And so the Ohio River provides drinking water to a lot of cities. So Cincinnati, Ohio, they literally had to block their water intake for their drinking water last week. It may be open now again, but they had to block the water intake because they literally detected what was the chlorine, the vinyl chloride. Is that what it was? Yeah, they detected that in the water. So this is affecting the drinking water for major cities. Cincinnati, Ohio is a major city. It's insane.
Is such a hot mess.
Yeah, it's literally just a hot mess. We should do a hot mess segment on the show.
Girl. Yeah, absolutely. Hot mess of the week, Norfolk Southern.
Shame. Boo.
Shame. Yeah, and I mean, Norfolk Southern is starting a $1 million
that's it,
pot of charity or something for these That's what I'm saying.
$1 million does not go far these days.
Court.
What?
You know, like I don't care how much money it is. Like they should have to pay restitution to these residents. And I really feel like if we just opened up the market, got the EPA out of the way, and let courts really do their thing here, then residents would be able to sue Norfolk Southern for all of it, you know, like every cent to make things right. And no company would ever risk doing something like this in the future. Like, let me tell you, if Norfolk Southern got taken to court in a really major way, it would signal to absolutely every other company like them that they need to mind their P's and Q's in a very serious way. And that's how it used to be. Like companies would incur more expenses upfront to protect themselves in the long run from these lawsuits. They used to be called nuisance lawsuits. Now they're environmental lawsuits. And they did that with profit in mind. But once the progressive era came in and a bunch of courts decided to stop prosecuting these things, like it became unaffordable for companies to be green. So like, let's say you're a businessman that really cares, which by the way, a lot of them do. Let's say you're a businessman who cares and wants to take these precautions. Well, the market might flood you out because nobody else is really incurring any, costs if they do pollute other people's property, right? And this is perfectly in line with libertarian values. Like protecting private property and using the courts this way is in line with this.
Yeah, and I think another free market angle we could even take on this is that Pete Buttigieg was complaining that the Trump administration, oh my God, the big bad evil Trump administration, they ruined the ECP plan, the electronic pneumatic brakes. They ruined it. Oh my God. Well, in a free market, wouldn't a train railroad company be able to put any precautionary devices on their train if they wanted to?
Yes, and they do.
Right.
Right? Because they don't want to have massive explosions like this. Like, this
Right.
was gross negligence, but if you know that you're going to incur some serious costs if anything goes wrong, like, you mind your P's and Q's.
Mhm.
Right? That's what we call the invisible hand of the market working, right? You will take on these safety measures
Right.
as like a free market regulation. Like, the government doesn't have to do it. If the courts do it through tort reform, then I think companies would actually take on more responsibility. Because right now, essentially what you have are these major companies and the EPA and other regulators in bed together.
Mhm.
Right? Like, these industries, and we've talked about this in several episodes at this point.
I need
These
somebody to
industries,
drop like an EPA files or something,
oh
because
my
we're going to find the
gosh.
exact same thing as we found in the Twitter files. The government officials from the EPA talking to Norfolk Southern, talking to all these
Yeah.
transportation companies, and we're going to see some, I
Mhm.
think we would see some crazy stuff.
Yeah, to go easy on them.
Yeah.
And to not, over-regulate their industries, because a lot of times these regulators want to get a job in those sectors after they
Uh-huh.
leave the regulatory branches.
Mm-hmm. And how did the NTSB, they literally found that it wasn't an accident, it was 100% preventable. Even I know we're having this discussion, like,
Yeah.
okay, in a free market situation, this wouldn't have happened, but can we just float the idea that this could have been on purpose just because the investigative board, the federal agency, like, this is a government thing too, they found that it was completely preventable. It was 253 degrees above ambient, what it was supposed to be. It just seems like so many things. I mean, it's either extremely gross negligence or on
Yeah.
purpose. Those are the only two options.
I don't know. Because I do feel like more and more of this stuff has been happening. I don't want to dive too much into conspiracy,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is genuinely a tragedy. And personally, I would not move back.
No.
You know, the mayor of the town is like, I will stay here as a symbol. I will keep my kids in this school. I will continue to live here.
I
But
get
lot
it
of these
as a
families
politician,
are-
but what point do you
yeah.
have to prove when families' health is at risk?
Yeah, again, the gaslighting that's happening. Like, it almost seems like that's happening so that Norfolk Southern doesn't have to come out of pocket with more money.
That makes sense.
You know?
That makes sense. What if a representative from Norfolk Southern slid the mayor an envelope and was like, "Yo, just say everything's fine."
I don't know that it's the mayor. I don't know that it's the mayor, but like, it just
I
seems
said, what
really
if?
suspect to me. It seems so suspect to me that all of these residents are still reporting health issues.
Yeah. And everybody's
And-
saying it's fine. And all the regulatory bodies
Yeah.
are saying that it's fine. And I
And
tend
they're
to
just like,
trust the people over the regulatory bodies.
Go see your doctor, I guess. Hope that helps. Heart. Like,
Are we going to pay for your doctor's visit? No. Okay. Heart.
yeah. I mean, 1 million is great, but I don't know if that's enough to spread around for the 5,000.
I mean, for the damage of the property value for 5,000 people who I'm assuming live in at least 2,500 homes there, it just seems insane. Insane.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the way the courts were in the 1800s.
I know. You seem
where
like
where you could go and take.
You sound really
could drag these
nostalgic
people
about
to
the
court.
1800s right now. You know what else we could do in the
I am not
1800s,
nostalgic
Maggie?
about the 1800s.
Slavery.
No, Olivia.
She's like, I miss the 1800s.
No,
when we
not
could
like
hold
that.
evil
Not
people
like that.
accountable.
Okay. Well, not in every area.
I'm just messing with you.
There was no best time to be alive. I think right now might be the best. I know that's a controversial opinion, but
I think it may be like the 80s or 90s, TBH.
yeah.
Maybe that's just because I've never been in the 80s or 90s, but it seems like really lit.
Honestly,
like
yeah,
before
like the power suits
before
and-
social media ruined everything. But because I feel like so like segregation, Jim Crow becomes really hella illegal in the 60s. After that, I feel like the race relations in America were a little bit better in the 90s because it was like pre-social media, so we weren't fighting with each other and seeing propaganda all day long, and we had just gotten the time to like basically get to know each other and like kind of be like, okay, the government treated everybody really bad, poor white people, poor black people, let's come together. That's just kind of my interpretation of the 90s, but maybe someone who like actually grew up in the 90s
yeah, actually lived during the 90s.
No,
What
but
year were you
that's
born
just
again? Wasn't it like 2001 or something?
Okay, again. Yes, I was born in 2001. Sue me. But this is just what my parents say about the 80s and 90s, and they were born in the 60s. So, yep.
Fair enough. You've got a firsthand account on your side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, like a lot of nostalgia. I just think during that time period, we were probably passing a lot of the regulations that have come back to bite us in the butt now.
You're honestly true. I think
You
that
know?
that is where people became a little bit more trustworthy of the government, which I guess maybe that's another thing that comes with the lack of social media and internet because now we know all this stuff. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way, I think this is a great place to wrap. I do just want to say, like, please pray for the residents of East
Yes.
Palestine and all of the surrounding cities that, they are healthy and don't have any symptoms down the road and that they get the money that they deserve from this disaster.
Yes.
Like, this is a horrible, horrible thing to happen.
Yeah, and I just want to put out there if anybody listening or in the comments has been affected, if you live around East Palestine or you're just kind of in the northeastern Ohio or around the Pennsylvania area, please comment and give us more insight. Like literally, what are people on the ground thinking about this? Because I'm really curious to know. Yeah, how y'all are y'all okay? Are y'all alive? Are y'all good? Yeah, please let us know if y'all good. Yeah, definitely pray for the people suffering down there. It's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back next week. You can find me on Twitter at Liberty Anders. And Olivia, where can we find you?
I'm also on Twitter at Rondeau Olivia and Instagram as well at rondo.olivia.
Awesome. And make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave us a comment telling us any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks again, and have an amazing week.
Bye.
Bye.